welcome back to the Treehouse Garden. You probably have some of your summer seedlings in the ground. Today's focus is going to be making sure you are taking care of those summer seedlings to ensure healthy plants and a plentiful summer crop. So join me today as we explore those topics. As you can see behind me, my cucumber seedlings are popping out of the ground at the bottom of my trellis. It's important to water your seedlings twice a day, but the time of day is also very important. These are planted in a box that gets full sun, and I definitely don't want to water them during that time. So I'll water them early in the morning when it's still shady, and then once before in the evening when it's cooled off. Generally, you don't want to get the leaves wet of your plants, but when they're this small, there's no way around it, so the time of day of watering is very important. Really important to take time to check on those root vegetables you planted. Probably this time of year, planting carrots. I have some beets that are in the ground. It's important to get in there and see where your seeds landed so you can go in and thin them out. It really is hard to pluck those babies out of the ground when they're healthy plants, but if you don't, you won't get a good sized crop, and that's what you're aiming for. So let's go in and look at the beets that I have going and thin those out. So as you can see, I have some beets growing here, and they're really close together. I like to thin my root vegetables when they get a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get in there, and it kills me, I know. You're going to go in and you're going to thin them out. So if you look at this beet right here, this would be a really good size beet growing on its own. So I'm going to go in the entire row and probably take about a fourth of these plants down to ensure that I get a good sized beet as an end product. So living in California, I'm pretty sure you probably put some squash plants in the ground. I want to point out my tomato cages that are upside down here are just to protect my plants while they grow, because I have beagles that would trample them running around the yard, so I'm trying to keep them safe until they get nice and big and bushy. The first thing I want to mention though about zucchini is when you plant it, or any squash for that matter, you want to make sure that you put the plant like up on a mound, and then you build a moat around it where you water, because squash leaves don't like to get wet. One thing that you want to do to check on your squash is to check out the leaves. If you notice any leaves that look orange or are dried up or are even riddled with bug insect bites, some of those you might want to cut off. So looking at the squashes here, and if you're curious, I have butternut, spaghetti squash, delicata, glory, and green zucchini in the ground right now. So we can see this one little leaf doesn't look very healthy, so I'm just going to snip it off. So I want to keep all the leaves nice and healthy to make sure I get a good solid plant. Here's another example of a squash that has some leaves that may have gotten wet watering, and they're not looking so healthy. So again, I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to snip those off and then take them away from the plant so I ensure more growth and a sturdy plant. Next tip might make you think I'm a little bit crazy, but I tell you it works. You want to check on your peppers, your tomatillas, and your tomatoes, and jalapenos even for that matter. Any pepper, any tomato plant that you have planted, you're going to want to keep the bottom layer of leaves off of the ground to give good oxygen flow. And you also want to go in until your plants are at least about halfway to the size you think you want them, to go in and pluck off those blossoms. It seems counterintuitive, but you want to let your plant get strong and sturdy before you allow it to produce fruit. So let's go look at some tomatoes and see if I have any that are ready to be pruned. So my tomatoes are looking really sturdy. They're almost to the bottom of my trellis where I'm going to grow them vertically. I go in probably every other day and I look for any branches that are growing underneath the main part of the tomato, and I trim those off. And I also go in, like I said, and I snip off any buds that are popping up. So let's see if we can find a tomato where this needs to be done. Here is a tomato plant that's looking really healthy, and I notice in the middle some little fuzzy blossoms starting to form. So I take my little snippet scissors and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to snip off those little blossoms. I also want to point out that I trim the armpits of the stem. So if you see that I have a little stem starting inside the armpit of the main branch, you want to eliminate those to ensure you have a nice sturdy, oh, look who came to join us really quick. Hello, Jem, how are you? Can you say hi? Yes, this is my beagle Jem. He's quite troublesome sometimes. And anyway, back to the video. So you want to trim off blossoms. Another example of the tomato trying to grow out another stem in the armpit. So I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to snip that off. You see I have another one right here. I'm going to go in and snip that off. So you want to try to keep the armpits, I know it sounds terrible, of your tomatoes clear of extra little branches that might derail the growth of the main plant and might try to take over and hinder the growth overall. Thank you for joining me again at the Treehouse Garden. Remember, it's important to not just drop your summer seedlings in the ground. Just take some time to check the leaves, check your watering, take off all those little buds and flowers until your plants get established and big enough to support production. And if you do, you should have a beautiful summer crop. Hope you're enjoying this wonderful weather, and I look forward to you tuning in again.